A lot of people are going to remember, like I do, 1979, the abduction of a young boy named Etan Patz. And it's recently been back in the news. This is a crazy story, really. The Supreme Court has overturned the conviction of Pedro Hernandez. I'm joined today by criminal justice Chris, who is an author, a journalist. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jason.
So you know a lot about this story. I don't know, I don't think you're from New York, but I remember I am about the same age. I was 7 in 1979. Etan
Mhm.
Patz was 6 when he was abducted. And in many ways, this is a case that, he was the first kid to be put on the milk carton. Like this kind of shook everybody in a way that's difficult to frame for people who weren't present at the time. And this was big news in New York. You didn't have the internet, but I remember this being all over the place. And this was a kid who, it was like his first day of walking to school alone. He was in first grade, 6 years old, back at a time when you could, even in New York, leave the door open kind of thing. And this kind of changed all that, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it changed it even for me. I mean, it was obviously a New York story, but as a child, with all the stranger danger that was going on in the 70s and 80s, I mean, my family had quite a reaction to it. I was not allowed to walk to school by myself. I had to walk to school with a friend. At one point, my mom even was so upset about a lot of the kids being abducted that were in the papers that she called my busing authority and requested that my school bus stop be placed in front of my house.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean
My,
that's the thing. This sort of like shook the nation, and then there's a lot of strange aspects to it still because here we are almost 50 years later. Now, but let's back up because I think there's a lot of people who don't know a lot of the details of this case. It wasn't until 2017, so almost 40 years after the abduction, and it's attributed to this guy Pedro Hernandez who was working at the supermarket or something, and then he admitted to it and then he denied it. Give us the background here, Chris?
he was working at a bodega. It's in the general neighborhood where Etan Patz was
It
abducted.
was the West Village, right?
Um, I believe so. I cannot remember off the top of my head.
Yeah,
Um,
Prince Street right here. So it's like Soho.
so Pates was abducted. Hernandez eventually said, "I did it." Uh, he said that he did it to some family members, but the problem is Pedro Hernandez has mental health issues, and he has an abnormally low IQ. I believe it's around 60. So you can't take that type of confession as reliable as his defense attorneys have argued. There's limited evidence to actually connect him to actually abducting Aton Pates.
Uh-huh. And this case to this day, it's characterized as basically having stymied the police. You would think if an unusually low intelligence individual just basically abducts the kid in the basement of the bodega, like how is that so difficult to solve as a crime? You would think there would be evidence all over the place. If some dummy just grabs a kid, molests him, and kills him, it should be, why did it take 38 years to convict Hernandez?
Well, he wasn't exactly abducted in the basement of the bodega. He was abducted on his way to his bus stop. But he allegedly, Hernandez is saying he placed him in a box and put him in a basement. From what I remember. From what I understand, one law enforcement person that I spoke to obtained the measurements of the alleged box that Hernandez placed Pates in, and the box would not have held the child's weight or his dimensions, for starters.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember what the box was off the top of my head. It might have been like a produce box, something like Dole.
Mhm.
But yeah, um, the box would not have been appropriate for moving a body or storing a body.
So it was the morning of May 25th, 1979. He left his parents' apartment, 113 Prince Street, by himself for the first time to walk a block and a half to school. And he was wearing a future flight captain pilot cap. So at first, detectives considered the Pateses to be possible suspects, but quickly determined they had no involvement. An
Mhm.
intense search began that evening using nearly 100 police officers and a team of bloodhounds. It continued for weeks. Neighbors and police canvassed the city and placed missing child posters featuring his portrait. Now, this story came up years after the fact, a few years ago, when I was working with Manny Grossman. And not to get
Okay.
too deep into the details of that, but I seem to remember, I mean, Manny was always talking about Son of Sam, and I agreed with his take. I was intrigued that he brought this up because I hadn't thought about the case since probably 1979. I don't know if I even followed the conviction in 2017, but what would you say is, if it wasn't Hernandez who did this, who else is suspected of being involved?
Well, first of all, Jose Ramos was suspected for being involved for quite a considerable amount of time before Hernandez confessed to the
Uh-huh.
crime. Um, Ramos is connected to a woman who was employed by the Pates family. She was essentially, you wouldn't call her a babysitter, but you would call her more of a caretaker.
Uh-huh.
Her Ramos was in a relationship with her. Ramos was a pedophile. He was routinely homeless, and he was actually living out of like a drain tunnel at one point. When they went through his materials, where he was living, they found some evidence that he might have abducted Pates. Um, Long story short, the Pates family litigated Ramos. They won a civil suit, but then they eventually dropped it after and withdrew it after Hernandez confessed to it.
Isn't that kind of weird?
I would agree. I think it's weird. Especially in light of the suspect that the NYPD allegedly has. And I've talked to several detectives. And the main suspect, according to their records, should be Ben Rose, and he was a confidential informant for the NYPD, according to Jim Rothstein's unpublished
Oh,
memoir.
right. Now it's coming back to me what Manny was talking about. That's the
Yeah,
Right
yeah, because
Honorable Boots Rothstein, the mayor
yeah,
of.
Jim, I have talked to Jim before. I have not talked to him recently because he is having health problems. But Manny was actually fortunate enough to be gifted the unpublished memoir by Jim Rothstein. And it's in his unpublished memoir that Ben Rose was an NYPD confidential informant, and that the last person Pates was seen with was a person meeting the description of Ben Rose. Now, not long after Pates was abducted and disappeared, Rose also ended up going to prison. He worked as a manager for his father's pharmacy. His father was Leon Rose,
Right. Now it's
and
coming back to me.
they were taking pharmaceuticals were being taken and distributed on the black market and sold through narcotics trafficking.
Right.
More information on Ben Rose, the reason why he turned into a confidential informant in the early 70s. He was arrested for child trafficking, and he was a pedophile. More
Right.
interesting, he also lived in the general neighborhood as Jose Ramos's business, that street business that he was running.
I
So
mean,
you
doesn't
have
it seem like this guy did it?
um I personally tend to believe that it was Ben Rose.
Yeah, that's what I
I
mean.
tend I wonder I personally wonder if Etan Patz was trafficked, if he was also working with Ramos, just because of the proximity. That's just my own opinion. In a book that was written about Patz, Ramos is stated clearly to have said that he knew who the Zodiac killer was.
Right.
And the
Right.
Zodiac crimes, a lot of people have argued, tie in with the Son of Sam crimes.
Right.
And this book was published years ago, so you have to wonder why Ramos would just say something like that if there wasn't some type of factual basis to it. And if Ben Rose ties back um, to the criminal activity that was going on within Yonkers, it's something that really should be questioned, and why Ben Rose hasn't come up in trials, or at least through the defense or the prosecution. You have to question it, because you would think that that would be considered exculpatory evidence under Brady versus Maryland, in
Right.
my opinion.
Well, I
Uh,
think you also have to consider that if a dumb guy abducts a kid and sticks him in a box in a basement, you got bloodhounds all over the city, you think you'd be able to solve that in less than 38 years. But if you are protecting an informant and an
yes.
incredibly large series of just societally repulsive crimes, that might explain why the police had so much difficulty in putting this all together.
I would have to agree. Um, Ben Rose was Jim Rothstein's confidential informant. He was also a confidential informant for the NYPD under the Operation Together, which was looking into organized crime and child trafficking.
It's funny. I
I
mean,
sent you I sent you an article on that as well that I had written, and that's the Operation Together is a very interesting case to look at. Ben Rose was known under several different monikers within uh, the underworld. He was known as Dr. Rockefeller. He was known as Quasimodo because he had a hunchback. He suffered from scoliosis. I believe under with the NYPD, he went under the name GAFF in Nevada. He's also discussed in, I don't know if you're familiar with Philip Crawford Jr.'s work.
no.
He's written a book that's very good on LBGTQ history related to gay bars at the time being controlled by the mafia.
Right. Hmm. It's
And
amazingly dark, huh?
in his book, he's named Nevada
Right.
and GAFF.
Right. Now, so Eric, how's Eric doing? I haven't spoken to him in years.
Eric Galati, I don't talk to Eric a whole lot. Every once in a while we'll speak, but
Okay. But
I don't talk to
he
Eric much.
knew the right. He's the one who used to call him the Right Honorable Boots Rothstein. He had a whole long name for him because he ultimately Rothstein became the mayor of something, right?
Yeah, he was the mayor up in Minnesota, and that's the location where Jim and his wife and family, I believe his family also resides in that area.
Yeah. So I remember the pharmacy. I remember. Hmm. So, I mean, again, this is, everybody today is talking, of course, about Epstein, but this almost seems like it's a continuation of stuff that was going on. And with Son of Sam and the Zodiac Killer, we don't really know what these things lead to.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, retired Yonkers employee Kevin Murphy. He worked in the Special Investigations Department for Yonkers. That's what he compared the case to, because he originally began looking into the Son of Sam case because Yonkers was suspected as maybe having a bigger involvement in it, and John Spencer directed Kevin Murphy to look into it further. And he started looking into child trafficking, and he obtained some informants names, and that's whenever he stumbled across the Etan Patz case, and
Hmm.
he was called in and had a meeting with the NYPD related to the case.
Right.
Yeah. And Andre Rand was also considered a suspect as well, but it doesn't appear that Andre Rand was involved in this abduction. I mean, you can't rule it out because if it's a child trafficking network, there would be more than one person working together. And you can't even really say that. I tend to believe that Hernandez had nothing to do with it, and this is attributed to his low IQ and mental health issues, as well as possibly how he was questioned, or
You mean his
maybe he could have
conviction?
been influenced.
His
Yeah,
conviction is attributed to
yeah,
that. He's sort of
yeah.
the fall guy for a larger, and that makes sense. If we've got this big organized network of sophisticated, wealthy people engaging in terrible crimes, they pick some idiot to frame with it, and that's what happens.
Yes, it's unfortunate. I mean, you can't totally rule him out. I guess he could have been involved with the network if Pates was trafficked and if he was subsequently eliminated.
Hmm.
But I tend to think I tend to lean more toward Ramos and Rose, and Hernandez having nothing to do with it.
I think we should talk about that more in the future because this is an interesting case. But for now, let's stick for a minute with Hernandez because this was just Monday or Tuesday of this week, just a few days ago here, that the Supreme Court on Monday, they reversed a lower court decision. So 2017, Hernandez is convicted. Then the conviction was overturned. Now it's
Mhm.
gone to the Supreme Court. So what's that trail all about? And why was it overturned and why? I mean, the Supreme Court now says this is just a matter of federal courts and the limitations on getting involved in state court decisions. But why was it overturned? What's the controversy here?
Um, Frankly, I need to look more into the appeal. I just found out that about the same time that you did related to the article. I will tell you historically that appeal courts tend to uphold courts, and they don't take into consideration all the testimony that was given and other information. They just go straight off of just kind of generic information.
So this seems, just from reading this, I agree with you. You never know. I mean, you read an article about a trial, it's going to be different than actually reading the filings in the trial. And even that is different than actually sitting in the trial. I find you don't know what happened at the trial, at least, unless you were actually there. And even in that case,
Yeah.
you don't know what happened unless you were there for the matters of controversy. But this is saying,
Appeal courts will look at things such as if a defense attorney is arguing, okay, well, exculpatory evidence was withheld, and then they'll
exactly.
say, okay, well, we'll overturn this, and they don't necessarily handle it themselves, but then they turn it back over to the lower courts
Exactly.
to retry.
And we're even seeing here in the New York Times that the panel found that the trial judge in the lower court had improperly instructed the jurors. So, I mean, again, we don't know. This is not the appeals court looking at the facts of the matter. They're just looking at the conduct of the trial. And he had asked about several confessions that Hernandez had made, including one that he offered without being read his Miranda rights. So it's sort of, to the uninitiated in this matter, this just reads as kind of like legal technicalities, right?
Well, I don't know if I would consider Miranda rights a legal technicality. I mean, that's a basic
But what I mean is
constitutional
it's
right.
it's not
Yeah.
a question of evidence or, in other words,
Hmm.
doesn't tell us if this guy killed the kid or not. I agree
You're
with you, it's an
correct.
important right, but it's not, you know, physical evidence or material evidence. It's a legal procedural issue where if the
Yes.
guy did kill the kid and then he didn't get convicted because the cops didn't read him his Miranda rights, that's the way our law is supposed to work. But I think people would consider that uh, miscarriage of justice.
Yes, they would, but I mean that's what our legal system is there for.
Right.
You know, law enforcement is paid by the taxpayers to do their jobs and to follow the Constitution and to follow federal law and state
100%.
law. And unfortunately, if they don't follow procedure, then cases can be overturned. People cannot be convicted. And as unfortunate that as it is, sometimes that's needed in order to actually improve the system.
I agree with you 100%. I'm just, sort of looking at this through the lens. Obviously, that's all for courts and juries and lawyers to decide.
Mhm.
Here, when I look at it, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, is there someone or some organization that's very sophisticated that knows all that and can manipulate this process and basically benefits from there being this confusion where it takes 38 years to convict the guy, then it's reversed, then that's sent back. And now we've got a condition here where almost 50 years later, Alvin Bragg will decide whether to pursue a new trial in a case originally brought by Cyrus Vance. A lot of questions about him as well, Cy Vance. Isn't he like a second
Mhm.
generation district? Yeah, Cy Vance Jr. So this is digging deep into the heart of New York law enforcement corruption, allegations of it at least.
Yeah, and I mean, it actually goes back further than that because the person who originally reviewed the case, I believe under Ramos, was Morgenthau.
Right, Robert Morgenthau, who's like he's basically like the Batman character of New York City district attorneys. He's very well known.
Yeah, and I mean, if you read Jim Rothstein's unpublished memoir, he's also very critical of Morgenthau. I wrote an article on Morgenthau, and I have not sent this to you, but Rothstein had stated that he blocked him related to a wiretap, and it had to do with a cowboy sting where a couple men were profiting off of underage children in pornographic magazines.
Uh-huh. Wow, he was 99 years old. Did you say a cowboy sting?
Did I say what?
What kind of sting was it that he did?
It was basically a callboy ring
Call
sting.
boy, call boy.
And
Right.
whenever they eventually arrested these men, they found all sorts of material showing that they were using underage boys in in pornographic magazines for profit.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Jim Rothstein was initially handling the case and wanted a wiretap, and Morgenthau blocked him on the wiretap. And Rothstein believed it had something to do with a family member that he was protecting.
Wow. This
Yeah.
stuff goes really deep. And, we just had on the screen a moment ago an article talking about how Ronald Reagan declared May 25th Missing Children's Day. I mean, I remember this being such a big deal. And I mean, I was a kid at the time, but in retrospect, maybe it was even a bigger deal. Obviously, everybody's life is important, but at the same time, this is just one kid. And, all of the weight put on it. I don't know if you've ever seen this article here, The Bombshell That Didn't Explode. This is talking about a story about key officials in the Reagan and Bush administration involved in a call boy ring. The Washington Times, yeah, that's the article I was looking for. Washington Times had an article about male prostitutes, these so-called call boys being at the White House. Let me see if I can find that. They had receipts and things.
Yeah. I did not know about that. That's interesting.
Yeah. And here we've got 1989 White House call boys prostitution scandal in 1989. I'm not seeing the Washington Times article anymore. It used to be there. It's amazing how things like this, here it is, disappear from the internet. You got to really hunt around to find them. So this is what I was reading. Homosexual prostitution inquiry ensnares VIPs with Reagan and Bush. So let's see if we can read that. Homosexual making a comeback at the Washington Times. Yeah, see, it's very hard to find this article. It says, homosexual prostitution ring is under investigation by federal and district authorities and includes among its clients key officials in the Reagan and Bush administrations, military officers, congressional aides, and U.S. and foreign businessmen with close social ties to Washington's political elite. So see, this is the thing. This is all very coincident with the disappearance of Etan Patz. This is 10 years later. But again, I just don't understand how it takes the police and 1,000 officers and 30 bloodhounds 38 years to find one missing kid. It's crazy.
I agree, and they had a lot of leads. There was suspicion that he was killed at a house in Bedford Hills. I have the address, but I'm not going to disclose it, just for privacy factor. They also went to a property up in Phoenicia, New York, which they believed he was buried up there, according to sources. They took cadaver dogs. They got a search warrant on the property. They searched the entire property. Nothing came up. Arguably, the body could have been moved, and it was years later. I believe the search warrant would have been executed, and the remains would have been looked for about 20 years later. But all they found were deer carcasses. It's an area where it's very prominent for hunting and fishing, and it's a sportsy area.
Right, right. Now, you've mentioned the unofficial Jim Rothstein memoirs. I remember, I think I remember when Manny went and met with him and obtained that. So has Manny published that, or how has that been put out? Did Rothstein publish that?
Um, uh, Rothstein has not published it. He's given it to a few people. I was fortunate. He had offered to send it to me, but he was struggling with his health, and he wanted to send it to me whenever he felt a little bit better, which didn't end up happening. But another researcher provided me with the memoir,
And can people,
which
we should mention that people who are watching can follow you and read your writing on
yes.
medium.com/ at criminal justice Chris. So is that where people can see the Rothstein memoirs?
I have not published because of course it's under copyright,
Uh-huh.
but I have cited him in my articles.
Got it.
I would imagine if somebody wanted his unpublished memoir, I don't know if it's going to be published at some point. Uh, Jim is not doing great, but maybe his family will publish it at some point or give it to additional people, because there is a lot of good information in his memoir, and a lot of information that the public has not been aware of before, related to corruption within the NYPD, and how certain government agencies have influenced the organization.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if you ever saw, I had published on X. I went to the Walcott Hotel and let me see if I
Could
can
you
remember.
could you give me some background on the Walcott Hotel? I'm not
Yeah,
familiar with that.
this is when the whole migrant crisis was in full swing in New York City. And I just happened to walk by this hotel on 31st Street, I think.
Mhm.
And I noticed a bunch of army guys, and I went in there, and the whole hotel was being run by the military. And I called the police and I had mentioned that there were, well, first let's look at this video for a second. I want to share this with you if you haven't seen it, and then I'll explain everything.
Who are you waiting for,
Okay.
bro? Is that your baby? Is that your kid? Where's Detective Johnson? It's pretty dangerous coming over here. Looks like we got a lot of gangbangers around. Guy's waiting here for somebody, isn't he? This guy's really waiting.
Of the New York City Police Department.
Why wouldn't he go back inside if I'm bothering him? He's really waiting for somebody. Seems to be coordinating with this guy.
Emergency, such as a noise complaint, you may call.
Wait while I transfer your call.
Hello, this is the Midtown South Detective Squad. How may I help you this morning?
Is Detective Johnson in?
We don't have a Detective Johnson.
I called there yesterday and spoke to a guy who said he was Detective Johnson.
Hugh Johnson?
Didn't give me his first name.
Oh, no, we don't have a Detective Johnson.
So who's
How may I
Hugh
help you
Johnson?
today, sir? Now I'm curious.
Huh? Well, can you come over and meet me at 4 West 31st Street? It's the Walcott Hotel. I think there's a crime going on right now.
Yeah, we're on our way. Oh, yeah, what's going on?
Well, there's a bunch of people hanging out with a little baby. Looks like they're trying to hand her off to some sketchy dudes.
I'll be right there. Let me call dispatch.
Come right over.
I'm going to the Walcott Hotel, sir. I'll see you right there.
Thanks. Are you kidding? Do people fucking believe what just happened right there? That was the cops. That was the 14th precinct. I'm about to get killed standing over here. Do people understand what just happened? That was the police. They lured me over here at 10:30 in the morning. Someone told me on the phone his name was Detective Johnson. And that guy just said there is no Detective Johnson, doesn't care that there's two mid-20s foreign nationals right there with a baby who may or may not be theirs, a sketchy guy in a car with temporary Florida dealer plates, and the cops literally don't give a shit.
So yeah, now I remember what was going on. My interest in that hotel was when I saw the army there, I went into the lobby and I got like pushed out by a non-army civilian security guard wearing a jacket that said Neighborhood Association of Intercultural Affairs. And I looked into that. That is a nonprofit that received like $150 million from the city. And, you know, I'm not like looking around the city for people who are abducting children. I just happened to be walking around, saw the army, and, you know, one of my close associates, Charles Ortel, has really tuned me in to nonprofit fraud. So when I saw that Neighborhood Association of Intercultural Affairs, I looked it up. I saw they were paying their COO $650,000 a year. And it was 3 times what the CEO was getting. And the CFO was a convicted fraudster who shouldn't been allowed to work at a nonprofit at all. So I called the police about all this, and they called the 14th precinct, which is the neighborhood that covers 31st Street. You know, that's the precinct for that neighborhood. And the guy said, well, it's too late today, but meet me at the hotel tomorrow at 10:30 in the morning. And he said his name was Detective Johnson. So then I went there, and that's just what I observed going on in the morning. You know, the police officer, that's why I'm saying, where's Detective Johnson? Because the cop was supposed to meet me there. But meanwhile, this guy is standing here. That could be his baby, but what's going on? He's on the phone. So he called somebody from in the hotel to tell me to get away from him, that I was making him nervous. So if you're a father hanging out there with your baby waiting to be picked up to go to the park or something, why not just go inside the lobby? It's like he's waiting there to do a drug deal or something. And then look at this lady. What's she doing with an empty baby carriage? coming up there. It's almost like this was like a baby selling factory. Then I noticed he seemed to be on the phone with this guy who's down the street in what was about a 2010 or maybe more like a 2015 Ford Escape. And, if you got 3 of these migrant credit cards that they were giving out like candy, that car's probably about $12,000. So you get 3, $4,000 credit cards. You buy this car. Notice there's no license plate on it. Earlier in the video, I had detected that there was a Florida dealer plate, which is a paper tag taped onto the back of the car. But there's no way that this car had driven from Florida because the paper looked brand new. And if you drove 1,200 miles in a car, flapping in the wind, your paper license plate would be dirty and it would have highway scum on it. So something was very suspicious about that car. Here's this guy talking to the guy with the baby. Where's the mother? Who's this guy? He works in the hotel. But it's like, what the hell is going on at this Walcott hotel? And then when I called the police, the guy, that was the detective bureau at the 14th precinct, and he's making siren noises and dick jokes about Huge Johnson on the phone with me. Don't you find that kind of crazy?
It's different. It's a little odd. One question, you mentioned that there was no plate on the front of the car. Does Florida require front plates? Do you know?
No, but New York does.
Okay, but New York does. Okay, because like in my state, we don't require front plates.
New
So I
York
just thought I
does.
would ask that.
But that not having the plate wasn't a big deal. The bigger question in my mind was, how did this guy get a Florida dealer? Like, if you bought the car in Florida, sorry, not a
Mhm.
dealer plate, a temporary, like if you bought the car at a used car lot or something, and they gave you this temporary tag and said, okay, go to the DMV, like you could drive around for a week with that or something. But if you bought it in Florida, I'm saying, how did he get a Florida temporary plate in New York? The only way that I could conceive of doing that legitimately is to buy a car in Florida and then like that day or sometime that week leave and drive to New York, which maybe you would do, if you got a deal on a car in Florida, went there, flew there, bought it, drove it back to New York, took it to the DMV and got your plates on there. That could certainly be a legitimate transaction. But I'm saying I looked at that and it looked to me, first of all, the car was spotless. So did this guy drive from Florida and take it to a car wash? Because this is a 10-year-old used car. So, I mean, if you drove
You have
from
a point.
Florida, I've done that
Yeah.
New York, Florida drive many times. Your car just gets dirty from doing it. This car looked like he bought it in Queens and drove it to Manhattan that morning. So, I mean, a paper Florida temporary driver's plate, I mean, is somebody illegally printing that out on a computer somewhere? It just seemed to me like these guys were up to sketchy business, and it's not like you could run that plate and it's a New York plate and a normal car. It seems like a car obtained through sketchy means, not exactly registered, standing there with a 1-year-old baby that, what are these 3 adult men doing with a baby and there's not a woman around at this hotel, which, by the way, that hotel got jammed up. What's the name of the thing that,
I do think it's interesting, the woman coming down the street pushing an empty baby carriage.
right.
I will agree with you that the circumstances, when you take everything into consideration, at the place that you were viewing, it does look suspicious.
Now, here's another story about the Walcott Hotel. Troubled contractor, this is from 2022, shutting the $1 million halfway hotels. So 3-year law enforcement probes and safety complaints by the neighbors. This is this thing called Exodus that was basically taking convicts from Rikers Island and putting them into the Walcott Hotel. Exodus was hired by the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice in March of 2020 at the start of the pandemic, winning an $835,630 no-bid contract to place inmates released from Rikers Island and state prisons into hotels to help curb the spread of COVID-19. I mean, Whose idea? I don't understand how that even makes sense. But the contract soon ballooned to 55.6 million. So we're talking 835,000 to 55 million. And in January, Eric Adams awarded a new no-bid contract for another 40 million to keep the inmate placement program going. So, I mean, there's a whole lot of crazy, sketchy stuff going on at that hotel. And I don't
You think
know.
that they get, I understand that residents at correctional facilities or jails need stable housing whenever they move out and transition in order to lower recidivism rates, but you do have to question why a hotel like that would be
In
chosen for
Midtown
housing.
Manhattan? Right.
Yeah, whenever there would be better options for, halfway housing or transitioning back into society rather than Midtown Manhattan. That
Right.
is that is odd.
Right. I
I'm
mean,
not I'm
that's.
not a big I'm not a big fan of Eric Adams. I'm gonna be clear
Oh,
on
me
that.
neither. I mean, this was
Yeah.
obviously some sort of scheme because, as you're saying, look, I agree. There's going to be people who leave prison, and I could listen to an argument that we're going to give these people housing and help them find jobs and things like that. Can't we find some place in Queens or Newark where a hotel room is maybe $80 instead of 500? This is Midtown Manhattan. And by the way, if they're there with, weird license plates on their cars and other people's babies, like, how are you not just creating a headquarters for a criminal enterprise right there in the hotel? So it
I
goes.
would agree with you. It's kind of like the movie The Usual Suspects.
Yes.
Whenever they get them all together and bad shit starts happening,
And I'm glad you brought that up because it goes back to what we're talking about, where if there is, and I'm saying if, we don't know, but if there is a long-standing sort of legacy of NYPD protecting these sort of child exploitation rings, whether it's Etan Patz and Ben Rose and getting this guy in trouble, or Jeffrey Epstein or whatever the hell he was doing, or whatever is going on there at the Walcott Hotel. It just this stuff, it seems to sort of rhyme, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, and I mean there are allegation in Jim Rothstein's memoir that Ben Rose was involved in trafficking children to the United Nations.
Right.
And Rothstein talks in his memoir, and he told me about it over the phone and another person who Rothstein was also friends with corroborated that at one point he and his partner chased a person onto UN property, and they were instructed to leave by the UN police.
Wow.
Yes,
Really
it's
something else.
yeah, yeah. Uh, at some point you have to wonder what's going on. I know that there were a lot of investigations into the 70s, probably before and in the 80s, related to um, child trafficking and related to the intelligence community. I'll get you some Senate docs on it if you want to look them over. Uh, but Rothstein's name is in one Senate doc, and there's another one that's fairly interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, here's an article. This is from the New York Times from 1977. I don't know if it was more honest then or what, but let's just look at this view on Times machine. You can see the actual. So this is about Rothstein, the police studying arrests of Sturgis. Police Department investigation was ordered yesterday into the arrest of Frank Sturgis, convicted Watergate burglar and former Central Intelligence spy in Cuba. I think this involves Rothstein somewhere. I
Yes,
think
he was involved with Watergate.
this is just such a deep, deep rabbit hole, Chris.
Yeah, and I believe somebody had told me, and you would probably need to correct me whether I'm right or wrong, that there have been some allegations with Watergate that the reason why it actually happened was related to some type of human trafficking or prostitution. There might have been a book of names that they were looking for.
Yes.
I have not looked into this personally myself. I think it's interesting what the person brought up to me. I would need to look into it more.
That was all in Nick Bryant's book about Watergate. And there's so many names, it's hard to keep straight. But I've had Nick on the show, and we should definitely get him back. He's got a really good book called The Truth About Watergate. And it was maybe John Dean's wife was alleged to be, a Washington, D.C. prostitute. I mean, again, it all comes back to sexual blackmail and entrapping people with prostitutes. And certainly in the 1970s and 80s, if you could entrap somebody with a gay prostitute, particularly if they were married. I mean, I don't think today being gay is nearly as scandalous as it would have been back then. So now, but by the way, this stuff with children prostitutes, call boys, that was in the 80s. So I don't know. It's just,
There was a huge market for it then. I mean, it was socially frowned upon to be homosexual or part of the LGBTQ community. And unfortunately, people involved in the black market, like organized crime, capitalized off the community. And that includes, you know, gay bars that were largely operated by organized crime during that period. And it's pretty well documented as well that certain government agencies were using organized crime to moonlight,
right.
in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, so Watergate was about sex, G. Gordon Liddy says. This is an article from the Associated Press. Floor plan of the Democratic Party headquarters that led G. Gordon Liddy to believe the 1972 Watergate break-in was really about sex, not politics. Liddy, testifying Monday about the break-ins for the first time in 28 years, said he spent more than 4 years in prison thinking the burglary was an attempt to gather political intelligence for Nixon's re-election campaign, but years after his release, a Watergate author showed him the floor plan in 1972, and the plan convinced Liddy the third-rate burglary was really about finding photos linking the fiancé of White House counsel John Dean to a call girl ring. Yeah, this was a lot of focus of Nick Bryant's book. And there's more to it, though. It's not just about linking her. It was, Dean called the claims that he masterminded the break-in baloney. So, I mean, that's very convincing.
Interesting. I own Dean's book. I did not know this.
Yeah.
Huh.
It was pretty convincing, the Nick Bryant book. I mean, this is all so, it could really make your head spin. So, I don't know, what else should we talk about, Chris? There's so much for you and I to go into. I know we could do a million other shows. Is there anything else that you wanted to say about Etan Patz or this Pedro Hernandez thing being overturned? Do you think anything else will happen to Hernandez? Most people have forgotten about this by now, haven't they?
I think most people have forgotten about it, yes. I think it's an important case for people to revisit based on the current political climate in the United States. Like you said earlier, and like Kevin Murphy had told me, this is what was going on in the 70s and with the Son of Sam case.
Mm-hmm.
It's an early mini Epstein case.
Yeah.
And there's a pattern, obviously, within the United States that needs to be corrected. And maybe Epstein will help bring to light what was going on with the Son of Sam case during that era.
Yeah. It's almost like we can't solve one without first solving the other. And, along the lines of what you were saying before, right here, this caption says, Pedro Hernandez confessed to the crime, but later recanted. His lawyer argued that the confession was the product of psychotic hallucinations and delusions. So that also goes back to the Son of Sam and Ben Rose. If memory serves correctly, it was that Ben Rose pharmacy. They were doing something with LSD, which was the whole deal
Uh,
with
there were quaaludes and other
Quaaludes.
types of drugs that were being trafficked, and a lot of those types of drugs were popular in gay bars at the time, as well as being popular uh, for human trafficking, because sex trafficking does involve, unfortunately, uh, drugging the victims. And when I'm talking about drugging the victims, it could be the prostitutes initially to get them to be compliant. I don't know how familiar you are with human trafficking, but notoriously, people will be trafficked by a family member first. So I'm assuming that's why the Pates family were under investigation to begin with, and they eliminated them because a good portion of the time the family's the one that has done it.
Well, I think in this case, the police were protecting whoever did it. So by making the Pates family the initial suspects, it's like as soon
That
as you
too.
start looking at
Yeah.
somebody else, then the Pates family isn't going to suspect the police. They're just happy that they're not being investigated anymore. And look, as you know, I can't even begin to think what this must have done to destroy that family and each member. He's got a brother, and his mother and father are still alive. You know,
Yes.
they're the age, as I said, Etan Patz was my age. His father is my father's age. To just think how it's individually destroyed each of them. It's a horrible story. It really is. But, you
You know,
know,
that I would like to bring up that I did not bring up earlier is Jose Ramos. They had found in a financial anomaly following Pates's abduction. I believe that they found that he had a $10,000 deposit, if I'm remembering, according to my records. Ramos had said that he earned the money from his street business, which is kind of hard to swallow. If you look at what $10,000 was in 80 compared to
yeah. I
2026,
mean, you could buy a
it's like,
Corvette for $10,000. It's like
yeah,
getting a
it's
100 grand or something.
it's like $40,000, and you're telling me a guy that's living out of a drain pipe who is homeless and has a streetwear business was able to just earn $40,000 and then go off to Europe and take a European vacation following the Pates abduction. I find that,
Suspicious.
yes, I don't find that viable.
So
But
all
like I
of
said,
this,
I don't think Ramos was the only one. I think Ramos was likely involved, and I think he was likely involved with Rose, but that is just my opinion.
and I mean, look, all of this ties back to how could the police not investigate these things? Here's his father. I mean, look at this. This is a zombie of a man whose life has been destroyed and consumed by this whole thing.
I agree. I mean, look at his face. He
It's
looks
terrible.
I can't even begin to imagine how painful it would be
Yeah,
to lose a child and to have that wound repeatedly reopened and
yeah,
not know whether your child's alive or dead. Likely, he's dead.
yeah,
But that's a burden that nobody really should have to carry their entire life.
yeah. It's a terrible story, and the mystery only grows. I guess we'll have to see if Alvin Bragg decides to reopen this case. Chris, I want to thank you for joining me today. Definitely want to encourage people to check you out on medium.com/@criminaljustice. Chris, we'll have you back in the future to talk about this some more. I also want to remind people they can sponsor Crowdsource the Truth on subscribestar.com/crowdsource the truth or patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. You can also go to crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, and people can follow me on X at JG_CSTT. Thanks, Chris.